Hey, boys and girls, this is Old Man Yells at Cloud for Blue Powder Monkey's Patreon. We're doing a little behind the scenes on Cecilia, a graphic novel that we're working on. And we're building the sets. I'm building the set in Blender, as you can see here. Blender. This is not a tutorial on how to create things in Blender. There are plenty of those online, and they're 100% better than what I can show you. I'm mostly self-taught from those tutorials and experimentation, and that's what you're going to have to do basically. What I am here to show you is workflow, how I do things, and I want to caveat it by saying I am in no way saying that this is the correct quote-unquote way to do things. This is my way of doing things, and hopefully that is useful for you. So, Cecilia is what they call a two-hander, which is basically two characters. There's a brief third character at the beginning, but we're not too worried about them. And it's two people talking in a room. So the room itself becomes extra important in that case. It was originally designed as a short film, and when you're doing short films for basically volunteer, low-money type of stuff, you find ways to try to make them as inexpensive as possible to film. So the idea was we were going to go out to my parents' house where they had a nice living room with some big, huge windows and do it there. That all fell apart around 2020 when COVID hit, basically, and we haven't really done a lot of filmmaking since then, but my original background is kind of in comic stuff, and I really like graphic novel stuff, and we started experimenting with creating graphic novels based on old film scripts, and this is the first shot at it, and here we go. So this room was modeled by myself, pretty easy. It's just planes that I used. Sometimes I just used straight planes. Sometimes I used a plane with a solidifier modifier on it to give it some thickness. You could also take a plane, grab the face and extrude it out to create the thickness if you wanted to. Again, that's all kind of like Blender creation workflow, but I hope no one is like overly impressed by this because it's pretty simple, honestly. It's just creating cubes, lining them up on the grid, lining them up with each other. I measured everything out, more or less. There's a lot of people that kind of wing it as far as that kind of stuff is concerned, and that also works just fine. But for example, like the floor of the basic room, 28 feet by 28 feet. Roughly 7 meters and change if you're doing the meters thing, which is fine. All right, so this isn't an exact model of the room at my parents' house, but it's pretty close. Basically, in their house, there's a kitchen right here, and a little dining room and like some closety stuff. And then there's a living room that sort of backs up on this room. And then this is kind of their sitting room. No, I don't know. It's at one end of the house. They have a long kind of ranch house kind of thing. And they have these two big windows here. And then they also have a couple of big windows here, which I'm going to add in later. So one of the things I figured out, because this is the sort of the third time that I've constructed this, and each time I was sort of figuring out what was important and what wasn't important. And it wasn't important to do exactly because we're not filming in an actual location. The outside areas don't have to make sense. No one in the comic is going to know or really even be concerned about how the house layout is. For example, this hallway in real life goes to like a little bathroom right here, and then there's maybe like a laundry room or something right there. And I could have modeled all that out, but the reward for the amount of work it would have taken to sort of model a laundry room and a bathroom where you can kind of only see it, at certain angles like this, and the way that it's going to be lit, because we're doing kind of a noir pools of light thing, it didn't really matter. So that's just a corridor leading off somewhere. Our main antagonist comes through this hallway, basically. So that needed to be around. These are going to be bookshelves. And then I'm going to add a whole bunch of furniture and other stuff. Those are going to be in future videos. This at my parents' house is a pantry, and I may decide to do that because this will be in a lot of the shots, and having sort of that complexity in the background would be kind of interesting. But tip number 1, which I doubt I'm going to do graphics for, but if I did, good for you. File organization is key. File organization is key for every fucking thing that you do for the most part. You can wing it when you're kind of doing sketch stuff or just maybe planning stuff out or whatever. But the more time that it's similar to filmmaking. Filmmaking has 3 phases. You do like pre-production, production, post-production. Pre-production is when you're planning things out and scripting and storyboarding and doing all that kind of stuff. And there's not a lot of time pressure in that. There can be, but in general, you have a whole bunch of time to do a whole bunch of pre-production, unless you're working on some sort of like tentpole movie that Paramount wants to release on a certain date or whatever. But you're not doing that if you're watching this video. You're just a dude like me or a lady sitting around wanting to do their own projects. So you have, in theory, all the time in the world to plan things. You have, in filmmaking, you have the least amount of time in production because that's where other people are involved. And when you involve other people, you have to respect their time and you don't want to be dicking around on set. Post-production wise, you distill it back down to 1 or 2 people doing like editing and all the rest of that stuff. And then once again, time pressures can kind of come into it or whatever. So even for solo projects, in a lot of ways, you can plan too much. Like if you're just meticulously planning things to the point where you never get the project done, that's not great. However, more planning is almost always better. So what I figured out, what I figured out is in a lot of cases, let's say I wanted to put a camera over in this corner, then these walls kind of was a hindrance to that as far as visibility was concerned. Whoa. All right. So let's do this. If I can make Blender work the way that it's supposed to. Let's get down into my dumb hands and mouse controls here. All right, let's get back out here. All right, for those of you that get vertigo for 3D stuff, just close your eyes for a second. I'll let you know when everything is good. Okay, we're good. All right, so this would be kind of a camera angle into the room, for example. And if I wanted to, there, I've created a little camera. I just did that with Control-Alt-0. And if I wanted to back this camera up for some reason, did I even, I think there we go. All right, so if I wanted to back this camera up, I would grab it, and then maybe Shift-Z would keep it from going up and down, and then I could back up. And then, whoops, I go through the wall, right? So that's not great, because at some point I may want a longer view of the scene, and this wall becomes a problem. So because of that, let me get out of camera view here. There we go. There's the actual physical camera. So what I do is I created this corner, as you can see, as a solid object, and the organization over here. So here are house parts. Here are the floor parts. Here are the wall parts. Here are the roof parts. The roof parts also need to be cleared out quite a bit. So what would happen here is if I needed to move this camera back into here, I just turn it off. And then the camera can come back, and then I would grab that and I would turn that off. And now when I grab this camera, I can slide it clear back into here. And look at that, right? You've got, this is the actual camera view. So all of this stuff on the side wouldn't show up in your export type of thing. But, oh, look, there's some little bleeding over here, especially if I back the camera up even a little bit more. And then you add the closet and it's blocked. It's completely blocked. But by removing that closet and then removing, which ones was it? Were it? Corner, there we go. Now I get a clean shot. So that's the idea of setting things up on separate layers like that. And That's fairly easy to do in Blender. You can basically choose a thing, go into edit mode, choose, let's go face, right click, and then it says separate by selection, and that would create this wall as a separate item. So I would create the room, I would extrude the walls out of it, do all that kind of stuff, and then I would select them and create separate items. So because of that, we have an alcove here that can disappear and reappear if I need to. We definitely need like the front wall and the side wall. Those are important walls that we'll see a lot, so those need to go back and forth. And then super important, we're going to have a camera with a character walking down this hallway. So the easiest way to kind of deal with that is to be able to remove this end. And then, of course, be able to remove the roofs. The roofs are so important, they get their own folder. Walls kind of as well. Like, I don't expect to ever turn a floor off, but maybe I'll need to. So why not? And on top of that, here are 5 things that aren't cluttering up the rest of this. Like even this wall one, actually, I should probably break up and have these 2 main walls that I more than likely will be turning off and on, and this wall, for example. More than likely this wall, that wall, and this wall will be the ones I manipulate the most. I more than likely will create a separate wall collection in this house parts to throw those in there. I could even throw them in the roof because there's only 2 roof things, right? Just to keep all of the things that you're sort of manipulating the most often in one area. These little window things are pretty cool too. And I probably need to group them with the wall itself. I'm keeping it separate, but they also would be, if I got rid of the wall or if I, needed to turn the wall off, there's potential that I need to turn these off as well. They also, though, cast some cool shadows, which is their literal purpose. So there you go. Anyway, so that is how this is set up. And any of the separate items, I kind of break the area up. So here's going to be that third character, the night nurse, there's going to be a couple chairs and a table and a lamp and some other stuff. So there'll be kind of a night nurse area, and then there'll be sort of a library area where she's got this big tall standing bookcase and a bunch of boxes being stacked up and a bunch of all that. That'll kind of be in here. There'll be a separate area over here with some mannequin heads and a lamp and some other cool shit. And then Cecilia, who's the main character, she will have a section here because she's in a hospital bed. She's basically dying of cancer. So you'll have the bed and her nightstand and a whole bunch of pill bottles and IV stuff and cannula stuff and all the things that you have there. And having those broken up into separate folders means that I can more easily find things to selectively turn on and off if I need a camera and that kind of thing. So organize that stuff and spend a decent amount of time organizing that stuff so that you are able to grab this. And you may not know right away what you need to manipulate more often than others, but it'll become pretty apparent pretty quick when you have fucked up and you realize you need to click on something. For me, I thought somewhat about the roof, but I just didn't realize how often I turn this roof off and on. Because I have an earlier version of this where we got about 20 pages of shots taken out of it or exported out of it before I was like, I kind of need to redo this a little bit. And then I also wanted to kind of share the process and not have like the entire set built so that it would be so complicated you wouldn't be able to tell what I was talking about and all that. But I realized like you can do these top views, but if I have this roof on, bonk, now I can't really see anything, right? So these top views are really good for setting camera angles up to a certain degree and for manipulating items around to kind of make them more aesthetically pleasing and all the rest of that. At the same time, when you're in there like this, let's see. All right, here's a good example. I'm going to move this camera so that I don't have to turn all these corners off for now. So let's grab that. Let's G, Shift Z so that it stays on the plane that it was on. We'll go into there. Okay, so this shot, not as much, but let's rotate Y. Oh, Dutch angle. So let's say I want to do this really cool, like weird angle kind of thing, right? That's the sky right now. So whatever I have sort of in as sky, and I'm going to show you some of this stuff in a minute, when I rendered it, right, that's just random nonsense, right? It's just gray like the rest of this stuff. There's no lights in this scene, which we'll get to in a minute, or very little light. So that roof is important because now, look at that, it's blocking this ambient external light that sort of exists in Blender, and it's creating this cool sort of shadow world in here, and that's what you want. But it's so much easier to manipulate things when it's not there. So the roof is super important to have kind of on a separate in any of your sets, unless your set is like super tall. And this set is freaking 12 feet. So, you know, unless you're talking about like a 30-foot room, which, you know, might work for a warehouse or whatever, you really do want to have the roof removable and easily removable. There's a lot of people also that will set up multiple cameras, and I'm going to experiment with that. And then I would create a camera folder. And let's just do that now just to show you, right? So you just come over here, scene collection wise, and over here is your new collection. So let's do this. Actually, let's do this. Works like normal file hierarchy. There we go. Now, I don't believe I can drag to there. Oh, I can. That's awesome. All right, cool. And then I'm going to grab this camera, and I'm just going to throw this in here for now. So now, and this collection now has nothing in it. I say... All right, cool. This, I could set... Basically, as I set up multiple cameras, then I can just keep them all in this folder and turn them off and on. And multiple cameras are actually going to be really good, to be honest, because I found myself moving the camera back and forth like you would sort of on a normal movie set. And then I would realize, oh, I needed to shoot back here. So when you're shooting a movie, you do a lot of times, all the time, you do what's called coverage. And so if you're shooting a scene that's taking place in this corner, the easiest way to do it, if you haven't planned out each shot meticulously, is to do a long shot from back here, run through the whole scene or run through parts of the scene, then move the camera up, maybe get some two-shot, and then maybe get a close-up with one person and a close-up with the other person. Now the editor has all that footage, and they can just go in and edit it because they've run through the scene each time, and they can like match the performance and do all that kind of stuff. You can't do that in a comic, as you know. I can't because then it just becomes an animation. If I animate all the characters moving around and doing all their shit, I might as well just do a cartoon. So I have to set the camera up, move them a certain spot, and then if I'm like, oh, maybe I want a long shot of that, I have to either keyframe kind of the character movements on that, or I set up a camera that's just the long shot camera over here. And then whenever I move them around, I just remember to be like, I got to do an export from this camera, export from this camera, and an export from that camera. So it's the same sort of filmmaking way it's a different way to do accomplish the same things, that kind of thing. Okay. So now the next step I'm going to do right now, which I don't know if is correct or not, but I'm going to try to light this area so that I can get a sense of what it looks like empty before I fill it. I know that I'm going to have a main lamp here, and I'm going to have a couple other sources of light for a basic sort of 3-point lighting setup. And you can read about how to light stuff as far as cinematic is concerned. Blender has light stuff too, but you have to kind of interpret how to light a scene and then what that means as far as Blender is concerned. But your main light in the scene is called your key light, and that's the thing that's kind of giving out the most light. And then the other lights can be sort of secondary lights that do different things. My main key light is just going to be this big lamp right here, and then I'm going to have kind of a light over here somewhere, probably over here, and then another light over here. And then throughout the piece, what's written in is there's a couple of times where a car goes by outside. And I'm going to kill. This angle is kind of driving me nuts. It's kind of funny, actually. Let's see here. Let's do this. This isn't going to help my viewpoint here. But that camera being at a weird angle. Oh, it's still at a weird angle. All right, bye-bye, camera. We'll come back to you later. All right, so I don't know how I managed to... All right. Oh, it must be... No, it should be rotating off the thing there. All right, anyway. Making me dizzy now. Holy cow. All right, so I'm going to figure out where those three lights go, and then these headlights that are going to go by are going to be shining a bright spotlight through here at certain dramatic moments, and I need to kind of see what that looks like as well. But first, I need to set up my file, or my rendering stuff. So again, this might not be optimal, but it's how I gathered from various tutorials on how to do things. So, and this is a combination of decreasing my render time. I'm not going to need super hardcore renders because I am going to be drawing over them a lot of times to create the comic. These are just sort of references. At the same time, I do have a decent graphics card. I have a 380i, I think, or whatever it is. And it is capable of rendering stuff out pretty decently as long as I'm not doing crazy animation. I'm using cycles. Some people use Eevee, which is their other main one, and that's just up to your comfort level. Eevee, I believe, is a little more sort of video gamey in a way. It's maybe a little more simple on stuff, where Cycles is trying to go for sort of a realistic render. So if you don't have a light source that is set up correctly, go fuck yourself. Where Eevee, as you can see, you get an idea of like what those shadows are going to look like from sort of the ambient world light out of there. So I'm going to show you what I do, or what I did, because I'm going to cheat on my phone here to try to grab what my other presets were. And I'm not saying all of this stuff, again, is correct, but hopefully it'll help. So your noise threshold is... I also might not be able to explain a lot of this stuff as well, but it's basically like how sensitive it is to noise. Noise is the little dots that you'll find in shadows and stuff like that. I'm not too worried about it, so I'm going to have this right off the bat. And that means it's not going to cast a wider... It's going to cast a narrower net, I guess. It's not going to try to like denoise every single little particle of shadow and all that. I'm going to leave that there. Leave that threshold. Let's see. Let's turn this up to 0.03. So I'm basically going to increase the render part of it a little bit, but the viewport part of it I'm going to keep a little simpler because I'm not too worried about that. Max samples. What does that say? Number of samples to render for each pixel. So I don't need to render 4,000 samples for every pixel. I'm going to do like 500. And I think that's going to be fine. The other thing you can do, obviously, is if you render a couple of things out and it's not what you want, you just come in here and adjust those. And you kind of base that on how much time you want to spend with a render. And I'm able to render out cycle stills out of this relatively quickly, under a minute usually, which is fine, again, because I'm going to be trace stuff. All right, so I want to denoise. I do want to denoise stuff, and this is important. I want to use my graphics card. I don't know why this isn't default, but maybe some people use their CPU, but it's super inefficient, the CPU part of it usually. Then I'm going to come down here. Let's see here. Let's close this up. And this little simplify button helps a lot. If you need super realistic 3D renders, simplify is not for you. However, if you don't, simplify is for you. And then I'm going to turn this down arbitrarily to 4. This is the number of subdivisions that it puts into stuff. I could honestly turn that down to 0 and it would probably be okay. But anyway, let's do this. And then render, I'll turn that one down to 4. So I don't care if there's little jiggly lines here. And then culling, camera culling. We're going to leave that. We're going to turn it on, I guess, and leave it there. So culling, I believe, is whether... So there's a thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to have to look it up and come back to you on it. But there's a thing that you can do where after you've created your whole scene, you select everything and then you tell it to cull stuff. And what that means is Blender, for whatever reason, at least I'm on version 5, and I haven't studied a bunch of version 5, but the way that it was on the versions 3 and 4 and whatnot, if the camera was here and your view was here, Blender was still considering all of this when it rendered. And I think it does that to make sure that there aren't any random lights bouncing off some stuff that's out of screen and then coming back into frame. It's possible. Whatever the method is, you basically choose everything and you say only render what the camera is seeing. And then that's what it does. And so when you go to render a scene, it's only considering like this stuff in here. And it saves a bunch of time for render, basically, if you don't need to have like super realistic 3D light again. All right, let me grab the next one here. Then mark. All right. Now we're going to go, we're in scene. Format. Let's go. Let's render output. Output. There we go. Okay. So output is output. It's what your renders kind of poop out as. Frame we don't care about because we're doing single stills and all the rest of that. However, this I am going to turn up. I have a 4K monitor, so that basically means that I'll utilize all of that, and I'll get a really detailed render when it comes out. I don't know that this is for your timeline. I don't know that I need more than 250 frames of something that I'm not doing animation on. I, in theory, sort of need it if I'm going to do like a cloth sim or something, maybe, but I'm not really going to do a lot of that. And then this is my default output, and I'm going to change this into JPEGs because I do not care for the pings if I am going to do a thing that I may eventually print or whatever. Image sequence. All right. So I think that's just it for that. All right. Okay. And then the next thing is cameras. So Blender has these cool little cameras: normal camera, dolly camera, crane camera. I got pretty used to doing, I should probably more or less use the dolly camera, but I ended up using the crane camera most of the time here. Oh, let me show you another trick, which you may already know. Let's do that here. I have to make sure I have my scene collection cameras set. And now when I add, which is Shift A, camera, crane camera, there we go. Okay, so now it's all tucked in here where it's supposed to be. It added some nice widgets for some reason too, which are all these things. All right, so there's my camera. And this is a little more complicated than the normal camera, but it's kind of worth getting used to, I guess, where you treat this like a posed thing, right? So you can grab your pose there, and then you can move that, or you can move this. This is a focus point, which we'll get to in a second. This is the camera itself, and then it helps with transform keys and camera rig stuff and all the rest of that. So, all right, let's turn this back to here. So with cameras, you have different lenses that are focal length, and you have a depth of field and all the rest of that. So focal length works exactly like it does for regular real-life lenses in film. And that's a thing that is probably worth studying if you want to do sort of cinematic style comic books. Otherwise, you can just make it up and you will experiment with it. Let's see here. Oops. Let's try this. So let's rotate Z. Let's grab. Throw it back in the corner here. Okay. And then let's grab this. I'm turning on local because that way, normally here are your directions. This is X, this is Y, and Z is up and down. With local, it'll do it in conjunction with the thing that it's attached to, basically, kind of. So now when I grab Y, probably, yeah, it'll be along the camera axis here. Oops, and I got to turn. This is snapping. I had it turned on, so it was trying to snap to specific spots. All right, so now that's in focus. And this focus won't matter until I set the focus, but we'll go ahead and go through that. So we'll go back to object mode. So now we're looking through the camera. So one thing at a time. You can turn this, if this thing is distracting you, you can turn it off up here, whatever. But a 50 millimeter lens is, in theory, sort of approximately how a human eye would see a thing if you were standing someplace. Smaller numbers give you wider angles, which is paradoxical, but that's how it works. So if you go to a 21 millimeter lens, now I'm seeing all of this. Before, I saw all of that. 21, I see all of that. You can also tell things start getting distorted a little bit too, which they do in movies. And the difference between having a person's face in a 50 or 85 millimeter lens versus a 21 millimeter lens, you can make people look fairly different. So anyway, so we'll go back to 50. And now we're kind of more in. And now we'll go up to 85. And now we're really in, right? So you'll have to, that's a creative choice. I was about to say you have to figure that out. But figuring that out implies that there's a correct way to do it. And there's not a, quote, correct way to do it. There is many different correct ways to do it. It just based on what you want. So we'll leave it for 50 for now. And then we're going to turn on depth of field. And we're going to set depth of field to aim, which means this little aim tool right here. Or you can click this little eyedropper, and I could choose to have this in focus for for whatever reason, or if there was something in the foreground. It's kind of like when you've got your phone, you're trying to take a fucking selfie, and you've got like something in your hand, and the camera's trying to focus on the thing in your hand. But now cameras are a little smarter, and they try to focus on the face. But maybe you want to focus on the thing in your hand, and then you have to push the little. That's what all this is. Normally, I'll just set it to that. I'll just click on that. And then this becomes the thing that is in focus, and everything else isn't. All right. So f-stop works like normal film stuff. The lower this number is, the narrower your depth of field is. So let's show you this. Let's go to the overhead view here. So don't at me. These are made up numbers, but this is the idea. Let's say that this 2.8 gets you focus from about here to about here. And then all of this gets progressively more out of focus, and all of this gets progressively out of focus. If I go up to 18, now maybe from here to here is in focus. That's basically how it works. Now, if you're doing realsy filmmaking, there are people called cinematographers that have way deeper knowledge about this stuff, encyclopedia-wise. Because what this is basically a measure that includes how much light there is and how big the iris is, or basically how much of the lens is being exposed in a certain way. It's a whole thing, right? But fundamentally, all you need to know is lower number, narrower focus, higher number, wider focus. And then you'll have to mess around with the fact that with these narrow focuses, you need less light. And with the bigger focuses, you need more light, because that light basically needs to be viewing on everything. That's the way I think it works. I don't think it's opposite than that. All right. So as an experiment, we're going to turn this roof on. Do it right in front of you, Hal. We're going to go to the camera view, and let's render out. Let's see. I don't think it works with. Yeah, I don't think it works with the viewpoint render, though that only takes a second. Yeah, you can't really tell anything there because there's no contrast or any of that. So let's see what it looks like rendered real quick here. As you can see, it's just counting up to these cycles. It's already got to 500. Now it's doing the other side. And now it's denoising, and boom. That wasn't a super complicated scene, but it rendered pretty quickly. So most of this stuff looks in focus. So that's not a super good example. But let's go ahead and go down to, just for funsies, let's widen the angle here a little bit. There we go. Let's go down to like 1.6. There are also very specific stops in filmmaking that correspond to the amount of light squared or some shit. So like you go from 2.8 to 5.6 to 8, 11, 16, and 22 is how I think it normally goes. It kind of maxes out at 22. But, you know, with Blender, it's like you can do whatever you want, right? So it's not going to, it might not do anything because, you know, 7 isn't any different than 6 or whatever. But you can put in whatever number you want in there. It doesn't matter. But if you want to try to basically be learning stuff at the same time, study filmmaking cinematography and kind of figure out what your f-stops are and all the rest of that. All right, so let's go 1.6. Let's go 1.2. What I'm trying to do here is get this stuff to be a little bit out of focus to just kind of show you how it would work. It's not a very good example, though, because I don't have stuff in the foreground. All right, and I don't have a lot of light. So that looks pretty okay to me. Let's do this. Let's turn that off. Nice. All right, let's get out of this view. Let's create a sphere. Mesh. Yeah, let's do that. That may be right there. Let's make it 1 foot. I could have scaled it too. Again, there's like a ton of different things you can do. And let's turn it right. Let's grab it and move it towards us a little bit. There we go. Cool. All right, so now let's try it and see what happens. Perfect. All right. So you can't see this clearly, but you can clearly see that it's out of focus. All right. So for funsies, because we're kind of going down a rabbit hole now, let's do a light. Let's do a spotlight. Let's grab Z to here. Let's grab Y to here. Let's grab X to here, rotate X to there, and rotate Z to here. Oop. Oh, I'm on local. There we go. Rotate Z to here. Nope. Try it again. Rotate Z. How about that? Okay, cool. Let's do that. Let's do that. I'm going to do just like a little quick kind of doodad here. All right. Maybe you are learning some Blender things. Let's turn this up to 100. Oh, let's turn this up to 500. I could also increase the exposure, which sort of does the same thing. There we go. All right, cool. Oh, and you can already tell, even from this style of render, right? That's like, all right. So then let's do this. I like these little black squares in a way. See, this is taking a little bit longer, but it's still not bad, honestly. Like, we're almost done here. Give me time to get a little drink. All right, there's depth of field, right? All of this nice and crisp. That, not so much. And then if we were to come around again to the camera, trying to figure out the easiest way to do this here. Oh, I can grab it here. There we go. All right, so let's go down to f-stop. Let's go up to 5.6. So this still isn't going to be in focus, but it should be a little sharper because we've increased our depth of field. Yeah, you can see how basically it's getting a little tighter now as far as that's concerned. This stuff obviously will stay in focus because that's where the focus point is. All right. And then for funsies, let's see, let's go up to 11. Might be able to just tell in this view, honestly. Yeah, and that's pretty close. Like it's not completely in focus, but it's close. All right. And just for fun, for the opposite, let's go back down to 2.8. All right. You can see this immediately getting fuzzy, right? And then let me grab that. All right, and now that's starting to get a little fuzzy. This is still fuzzy for some reason, and this should be, what am I doing wrong here? All right, let's turn off the roof. Oh, the roof is still on, so off. Maybe I'm not to it yet. Oh, there we go. Okay. Still not to it. I was being fooled by the 3D perspective. All right, so it's, oh, I'm moving the camera. So that's just me being a dummy. All right, so let's start there because I didn't have it in pose mode. So let's pose mode this. All right, there's a nice little lesson for you. Let's grab Y. All right, and you see that thing come into focus? And you see all that stuff in the background now out of focus back here, right? So that's almost, I mean, you can just literally picture racking focus on a lens. Mark. Right? Pretty cool. So anyway, so that's the stuff that you have to, this is the stuff that I've been figuring out, which again, oh, cool. Which a lot of people already know who have used Blender a lot, but you're presumably watching this because maybe you've used Blender a little bit. Maybe you've even done comics a little bit and you're trying to get a new fucking tip. But there you go. So setting up a bunch of different cameras, it can enable me to get a bunch of different shots depending on stuff and all that. The other thing you can do is you can set your camera up to emulate Hollywood style cameras if you have some experience or knowledge of cameras, or actually even if you don't, it doesn't really matter. So you've got all these sets there, but if you were to select the camera and go down, and that creates this little camera, if you were to select the camera, that sets up this little camera doodad on the side here, and you open that up, this is where you can animate focus and that kind of thing. You can enter in the same numbers as you can enter in the other thing. But you can also set up the sensor size, which is basically the little chip that's capturing the image itself. And by default, this is set at 36 millimeter auto, whatever. You click into here, and you're like, oh, look at all this stuff. Here's some generic stuff. Here's some generic stuff. Oh, but here's Arri Alexa 65. That's a specific type of camera. This is the large frame Arri Alexa, which I don't remember how it differs. I think it's vertical versus horizontal. Like the 65 millimeter here, I'm guessing is going through vertical, and then this is their version of like an IMAX thing where it's going through horizontal or something. And then little mini stuff, Blackmagic, which is a Pro-Am, very affordable camera that a lot of people use in like low budget indie film stuff because they're relatively cheap, but they give out very good images, and especially if you take them through DaVinci Resolve for color correction and all the rest of that. And then Red is the other sort of pro version stuff. Most people are gonna, a lot of people are gonna use the RE, any kind of the RE stuff, but David Fincher is known for using Red cameras and all the rest of that. So here, and this is basically going to emulate their sizes. I built a VistaVision preset. I did that by looking up what the size, they use a 65 millimeter film, I think, but they turn it sideways or they run it through the camera a weird way or something. But anyway, so when I click on this, boom, it gives me that 37.72 millimeter width that I had looked up somewhere else before. And then, boom, I have basically a VistaVision size thing. Now, the thing about this is for comics, let's be honest, it doesn't fucking matter. And this stuff, these shenanigans, are basically for where you do, if you're going to do an animated thing and you want to emulate a camera like you would if you were Pixar or whatever. Like, that's it. But since I do filmmaking, I kind of like replicating the thing it's kind of fun, right? But you don't have to do that. You can create any sized fucking sensor you want, again, because it's Blender. You can just make some shit up and type some numbers in here, and then it's fine. And you can make it horizontal or vertical if you want to do your dumb TikTok stuff. Any of that shit, it just doesn't matter. For me, I kind of did a VistaVision thing for fun, but it doesn't matter. Because when I go into this camera, okay, so now I have this nice vertical kind of this horizontal, quote unquote, letterboxy kind of thing. I almost set up like a Panavision type of deal, and I could get my fake anamorphic lens and do like lens flares and shit. But when you're doing a comic, you can crop this however you want, just in Photoshop or Clip Studio or Affinity or whatever it is, right? Like, it just doesn't fucking matter for the most part, or in any part, honestly. So yeah, so when I render this out, boom, 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 here goes the render. Boom. And then I take this into whatever graphics program I'm using to draw the thing. I can just chop a fucking piece out, right? I can do a diagonal piece out. I can grab whatever I want. So in theory, I'm kind of hampering myself here. You'd think that I'd want to create a lens that was square because that's my maximum landscape, and then as big as possible. So, right, I'd want to, if the resolution was high enough, because you obviously want to be able to get a good image out of it or whatever. Yeah, I could do like a camera export that was like this, and then just cut anything out of it. So this whole Hollywood camera thing for comics anyway is just kind of for fun. And I do it because I am basing these things on screenplays. I'm going to use a cinematic layout, which is not optimal for comics, to be fair. Like, these are different mediums. And in comics, you have the freedom, you have no budget, so you can create the craziest scenes with a million expensive quote-unquote things in it that you couldn't do in movies. And then you can crop the frame however you want. So guys like Will Eisner back in the 40s and 50s doing The Spirit, he's the shape of the frame itself is dictating narrative choices. If he wants something to feel claustrophobic, maybe he's making the thing shorter or narrower in a vertical way. And there are things that film can emulate that to an extent. If you are, for example, doing an old school 70s style anamorphic sort of thing, like the Thing, literally, or a lot of John Carpenter movies. Like he's working in that widescreen 239 or 235 to get these images. But like the Avengers movie, that was, and a lot of action movies now are 1.85, and we're talking about aspect ratios here, right? So 1 versus 1 point, this isn't actually true. This is 1/2, whatever. But you're basically, it's like your monitor being, 1080 by 1920 or whatever. You got the short side and the long side, and it's the ratio. So there's a lot of cinematography now, especially with the people watching stuff on bigger screens or TV wanting to try to look cinematic. I think it's 1:2 now, where it's literally 1 this way and 2 this way, where traditionally it was based on the size of film you were using, but again, they're using digital sensors now, so that matters kind of less. The size of film is literally restricting your options, I guess. But you would have, the bonuses of, don't at me, like the bonuses of film with the film grain. Anyway, so like a movie like The Avengers, you're 185, so you have a higher screen so that your superheroes can fly up and look like they're doing cool stuff this way, right? Doing a superhero movie in a narrow frame like this, it's not the best use of your space in a way for things that are going to fly and be super exciting and all the rest of that. Zack Snyder, I think, did a lot of the Justice League movie in IMAX, which is 4:3, which is like the old kind of TV look. So you had this big, tall, vertical thing. And there was a lot of difference between besides the editing and the redoing and the refilming. But let's just pretend for a second there were versions of that movie that came out that were, cinematic aspect ratio. And then I think his little quote unquote director's cut on Netflix was 4:3. The black and white one was for sure. So you've got stuff like that. And it's the reason, like, if you watch a Christopher Nolan movie, Batman's and stuff, especially in a IMAX theater, even a baby IMAX, but like we're fortunate enough in Seattle to have like a Realsy IMAX. So that IMAX screen is fucking gigantic, and it's tall as well as wide. So the stuff that he was filming in 65 millimeter, 70 millimeter, whatever, was like a normal kind of movie thing with the black bars on the top and the bottom. And then you get to some action sequence that was filmed on an IMAX camera, and all of a sudden it's taking up like the entire screen, basically. All of those options are available to you as a comic book creator in Blender or in anything, but even more so because now you could create a diagonal and have this be the frame, whatever it is, right? So think about that when you're laying your comic out as well. I am, again, intentionally doing a cinematic look in my comic, which is hampering me a little bit, but it's going to look, quote unquote, more cinematic than if I had a series of like vertical panels or a triangular panel over here and then a horizontal panel over here or whatever it is. So, all right. I think there's one more thing. The other thing, let's see, is it world? Yeah, it's world. So Blender worlds default to having some sort of background. And then you can get in here and you can grab, not even sure what it is, but you can probably look it up. But you can create like a fake sun back there somewhere. Is it this one? Let's see what that looks like. Nope. Oh, there we go. Oh. Oh. So this kind of thing. It's pretty funny. And there are also options, I thought. I don't remember which one it is. Metallic, base color, none of that. But there is a way to create, you can Google it up, because again, not a tutorial so much. You can get sun, specular? No. You can get like a fake sun out here, which is actually kind of cool. Add shader maybe? Oh, yeah, maybe it's a shader thing. Tune, translucent, reflection, principled. Anyway, I could spend a whole bunch of time wasting your time doing this, or I can just show you what I do, which is remove. All right, so I have a closed set with two people talking at night. I don't want any ambient light leaking in from outside, is how that comes down to it. So I just turn off the outside stuff. If you do, however, then you definitely want to figure out how to add in like a sun, because it's pretty cool. You can move the sun like in different locations and have it shoot rays in and all the rest of that. Speaking of the roof, holy cow, did you see the difference between this and that? Not only do you get these cool shadows on all sides, but you can see the ambient light, which is the light that just sort of exists in the area here. You can see the dark through here and even on this object. And then you turn this on and light is reflecting off the ceiling, which is adding light to it. And then you go back into your, your render settings and output settings and you start messing around. Let's see what Simplify does. Just dogs. See, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. Just dogs it down, especially if you're going to be drawing over the top of it. A lot of those settings that I went through are somewhat useful, but they also, some of them just didn't matter. So anyway. All right. So yeah, now we're kind of at the end and I may break this. I'm going to keep recording probably to kind of show the light setups at a certain point. So there'll be another video after this, but that is the basic setup for the room in Cecilia and the basic things that I do to set my files up so that now I can start populating this thing with furniture. Super appreciate you if you made it to the end. Please go check out our Patreon. That's the thing that helps us make a very meager living at stuff, and have a wonderful day.